Howdy! Python is a simple and convenient language, and at the same time it has powerful features that lets you code almost anything you want. But there is one more thing that makes Python so special. Even if you switch to a different language in the future, Python will likely remain your go-to secondary tool, because it's just that good at what it does. And today I want to show you how you can get started with Python in just 10 minutes. So you learn the basics and write your first programs. And hopefully this video will serve as a jumpstart for you to become a Python developer. So make sure to smash that like button and consider subscribing to my channel to stay tuned for upcoming tutorials. And with that being said, let's do some Python! But before we actually write code, we need to install Python Code Interpreter. So in order to do that, open your browser and navigate to python.org website. Hover here over download section at the top menu and click on this little button over here. It will download the latest stable release of Python for your operating system. In my case, it's Python 3.13.7. Now run the installer, and to make your life easier, make sure to check at Python X to path at the bottom. Then click on the Install Now button. If you're on Linux or macOS, you should have Python already pre-installed. You can check it by typing Python v command in a terminal. Windows users can do the same. Just make sure to wait until installation process is finished. Then hit Windows plus R hotkey, type cmd and press enter. Alternatively, you can search for cmd in your start menu. A command prompt will open, and here you wanna type Python v command to make sure Python installed correctly. Pay attention that v flag must be written in uppercase, since Python is case-sensitive language. Now hit enter, and the current version of Python will be printed onto the screen, which means everything installed and works correctly. Okay, so now you might be asking, where and how we will write and execute Python code? Basically, there are tons of ways to write and execute code in Python. Take for example idle, a built-in Python shell and code editor that is shipped with the Python installer, and thus you already have one, but personally I don't use it much. Other way is to create a plain text file anywhere on the drive and then write a Python code inside of it using any text editor, and then execute it through command prompt by writing Python command followed by a path to that file containing the code. This way you can execute literally any Python file. And one more way to do it is by using a special code editor specifically made for programming. These are called IDEs, and probably one of the most common for Python is PyCharm. Don't worry, it's totally free, and you can download one using a link in the description below. In order to keep things simple, I will write Python code in PyCharm. This way we can focus on the Python code and let IDE to take care of everything else. Okay, so now let's write some Python code. And it's actually a tradition when learning a new language to write a little program that prints the text hello world to the screen. So let's do the same here. The first command you need to know about is a print command. It lets you display any desired text to the console. Write down print followed by the parentheses, and inside of them, using single or double quotes, write the text you want to be displayed. Voila, just like this. Now let's execute this code by pressing the run button at the top. Our very first program is successfully executed, and you can see output over here at the bottom. It just prints hello world onto the screen. Also, you can print any math operations you want, say 2 plus 2 times 10 divided by 2. Hit run and bam! The result is 12. But all this data is actually hard-coded, which means we wrote them directly in our code. But in real world, data usually comes from different sources, such as a user input, a database, or a result of a complex computations when your computer does beep boop. So we need a way to temporarily store that data, and that's why we need to learn variables. Think of variables as a labeled box that stores something inside of it. You can create, remove or edit these boxes anytime you want, as well as read their data using their names. So in order to create a variable in Python, we write down a name of a variable followed by equal sign and then some initial value. Now you can use the name of that variable whenever you want. You can print it to the screen or you can use it in a math operations. And Python will use the data stored in a variable. As easy as that. But what's more fun is that now you can request a user input. For that purpose, we can use a function called input and put a result of that function inside a variable. As an example, let's ask a user of their name and then display a message saying something like howdy name. So the code will look like this. Hit run and here you go. Now you can greet a users of your program. But wait, currently our little program is pretty much useless. So let's change that by making a program that will actually do something useful. Okay, so I come up with an idea. Let's ask a user of their name, height and weight. And with all that information, calculate a BMI for them. Now if you don't know, BMI stands for body mass index. In other words, it's an indicator of whether you're in a good shape or not. And I think that would be a useful program. First of all, let's ask user of all the required information. Notice that we use a new function called int to convert a user input from text to numeric data when we ask for height and weight. That is required in order to use these variables in a math operations, otherwise it will not work. Second, we use a BMI formula to do the math and put the result in a separate variable called body mass index. And finally, we print the results onto the screen, followed by the message saying if a user is obese or vice versa thin. Here we also use if-else instructions, and these are called conditional statements. It allows us to control the flow of a program by executing some code based on whether a given condition is true or false. We use it in order to identify the message that will be printed. Think of it as you were asking a question. Is 10 bigger than 5? If the answer is true, then execute the given code block. And if it's not, well, skip it, as it doesn't meet the condition. In Python, a code block is one or more commands that have an indent, and you can indent the code either with a tab or a bunch of spaces. Most editors lets you simply press the tab key to make the indentation, so that's what we're gonna use. And as you see, basically the Python code looks just like plain English words, with some exceptions and rules that you have to follow. And that makes a program, as I said, easy peasy lemon squeezy. And now let's test our little BMI program. Hit run and bam! If we provide the data it asks for, we can get a useful information about our current body mass level. Not gonna lie, it's still a simple program, yet you can find tons of apps in App Store or a Play Market that does exactly this one thing, lets you calculate the BMI. Okay, now let's move on to the more complex stuff, and this time we'll make a simple guess a number game. Now that's also one of the traditions in a programming world to write this goofy game. I mean, you can literally find it in most of the programming books. But in order to make it, you should learn a new coding mechanism, loops. And as the name suggests, loops allows us to repeat the code number of times. This is powerful yet simple mechanism. And in Python, there are two main types of loops: for loop and while loop. A simple rule that will help you to distinguish between them is that if you want to iterate through a list of values or enumerate some data, then you use for loop. And if you want to repeat the code while some conditions are met, then you use while loop. Now look at this code. Here we used a new function called range to count to 5. Basically, it creates a list of numbers that you will iterate through. That's why we used for loop. And as you see, the values printed starts from 0. That's because in programming, usually things are counted starting from 0. But there are some exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt. And we can actually rewrite this code using while loop. This time we use a variable to track the numbers counted. And within a while loop statement, we put a condition to determine whether the loop should repeat or not. Now we run this code, and as you see, it works just the same. That's because we wrote a condition saying repeat this code until the number is less than 5. An attentive viewer might have noticed that if we put a condition that will never fail, that means the loop will also never end. And that's actually a well-known technique in the programming world. To make an infinite loop in Python, you can simply write while true. Now, with this knowledge, we can write our guessing game. The only thing we should also get familiar with is libraries. And in Python, libraries is the most powerful feature. Think of it as an external code written by other programmers that you can use in your code to solve any problem. Using libraries, you can train and use neural networks, make games, websites, apps, GUI interfaces, literally anything. But installing and using external libraries is beyond the topic of this video. But we will actually use a library right now, because Python actually ships with a bunch of built-in modules, and they are all covered by the Python standard library. One of them is random, and all it does, it lets you to generate a random number. And in order to use this module, we need to import it in our code using the import command, followed by the module name. Actually, it's a perfect example of how to use libraries. Remember, we are writing a guessing game. Thus, our program needs to generate a random number for the player in some range, say between 0 and 100, and then a user or a player must guess that number. And finally, using everything we learned so far, we write a code for this game. I'll leave a link to this code in the description below so you can tackle it to understand how it works. Note how we put everything together. We used a random module to generate a random number, we used variables to store that number and a user input, and we used while loop to let a player attempt his guess again and again until a condition will met, and that is if a number is guessed. And of course we used conditional statements to provide a player with a hint, saying if a number he guessed is bigger or smaller than the one he must guess. And after that, you can continue and expand this little game by yourself. For example, try adding a way to exit a game if a user writes exit word instead of a number. Also, some sort of score counter would be nice to have, or maybe even a difficulty levels with a limited attempts. Try to do it as a homework. And here is a pro tip. Google every time you don't know how to come up with a solution. For example, if you don't know how to exit the loop anytime you want, just Google Python how to exit loop. And here you go. You should use break command. Bam! And when you're done, you can continue learning Python. Consider reading some books or watching dev tutorials. I'll leave some useful links in the description below, so you can continue on your journey to become a Python programmer. But for now, you did a great job, and I hope you understand the very basics of Python and the coding itself. As you see, it's actually easy. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, leave a like and ring that bell, so you won't miss upcoming tutorials. Have a great day, my fellow Python developer!